Hello and welcome to NTD News Today. Kevin Hogan here. Let's take a look at our top stories. A rocket attack on the Kabul airport. The evacuation continues as President Biden redoubles efforts to protect troops on the ground. The service members who died in the bombing at the Kabul airport now identified. We hear outrage from a military mother over the way the evacuation was carried out and touching insight into the fallen sailor's life. After almost 20 years of building up the Afghan military, why did it fall so quickly to the Taliban? NTD interviews a former interpreter who fought alongside the Afghan military to learn more about the situation. Hurricane Ida makes landfall in Louisiana and continues into Mississippi, flooding communities and leaving scores of residents without power. Hurricane Ida made landfall in Louisiana early Sunday afternoon. It hammered the state and continued into Mississippi. NTD's Andrew Thomas reports.
Hurricane Ida knocked out power to the entire city of New Orleans, hours after making landfall on Sunday. With 150-mile-per-hour winds that tore off roofs and flooded communities, leaving more than 1 million homes and businesses without power in Louisiana.
And this is not the kind of storm that we normally get. This is going to be much stronger than than we usually see. And quite frankly, if you had to draw up the worst possible path for a hurricane in Louisiana, it would be something very, very close to what we're seeing.
The rising ocean slammed the barrier island of Grand Isle as Ida made landfall just to the west at Port Fortune.
So we actually have a live video feed coming from Port Fourchon, and the storm surge is just tremendous. We can see that roofs have been blown off of the port buildings in many places, at least. And this is right as the storm was making landfall. I was watching it live.
The National Weather Service said the Category 4 hurricane had weakened to a Category 3 storm, with winds of up to 115 miles per hour. Officials said Ida quickly grew from a few thunderstorms to a massive hurricane in just 3 days, and left no time to organize a mandatory evacuation of New Orleans' 390,000 residents.
We look at the situation, how overnight, just that rapid intensification, just this storm continuing to want to be so strong. I mean, think about landfall just hours ago, and even after landfall, this storm looks as healthy as it has at any time in the last day or so. So we still have an eye over land. And
next door in Mississippi, floodwaters inundated streets and surrounded homes, and reversed the flow of the Mississippi River. Over 40,000 residents lost power in the state. Ida made landfall on the same date as Hurricane Katrina 16 years ago. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Reports are out of multiple rockets being fired at the Kabul airport, but the White House has confirmed that operations at the airport will continue uninterrupted. This while Afghanistan's acting president says the Taliban are behind the ISIS-K bombing. A U.S. official reportedly said as many as 5 rockets were intercepted by U.S. missile defense systems. Press Secretary Jen Psaki said President Biden reconfirmed his order for commanders to protect forces on the ground. Afghan media said the rocket attack came from the back of a vehicle, and Pajwak news agency said several rockets did hit different parts of the capital. After the rocket fire, U.S. military cargo planes continued their evacuation, and now about 4,000 U.S. troops are still at the airport. There were reportedly not any U.S. casualties from the latest rocket attack, though a Kabul resident says most of those killed were residents.
I think they fired at the airport from here. Unfortunately, most of the casualties are civilians and poor people.
With the August 31st deadline looming, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan believes they can still evacuate American citizens.
We believe that we're down to a population of 300 or fewer American citizens who have yet to get out. We have evacuated more than 5,000. We evacuated well more than 300 just yesterday. So we believe there's still an opportunity for American citizens to get to the airport, get on planes, and get home.
Now the U.S. is investigating reports of civilian casualties after the drone strike allegedly on ISIS-K suicide bombers following the bombing. Senator Chris Murphy says alternative arrangements need to be made for Americans to get to the airport, given the threat of violence.
I think this threat remains beyond the next 48 hours. ISIS-K is going to use its abilities to continue to try to go after the Taliban and after Afghan citizens and perhaps American allies even after the 31st. So we're going to have eyes on ISIS-K, and we're going to have to continue to have the ability to follow what they're doing.
Meanwhile, the acting Afghan president suspects the Taliban are behind the attack that ISIS-K took responsibility for. The Afghan president says while U.S. and NATO troops are leaving, the Afghan people in general couldn't be evacuated, and now they face a country sunken to tragedy with terrorist groups taking over. Senator Mitt Romney says U.S. troops should remain until all Americans and Afghan allies are evacuated.
Leaving Americans behind and leaving our Afghan friends behind who've worked with us would put upon us and will put upon us a moral stain.
The U.S. and 97 other countries pledged to accept Afghans fleeing the country after the U.S. military pulls out. And Secretary of State Antony Blinken says there is a heightened terror threat near the Kabul airport. The Pentagon has identified the fallen service members in the suicide bombing at the Kabul airport. After the attack, Biden and the families went to Dover Air Force Base to receive the bodies. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was there, along with State Secretary Antony Blinken and General Mark Milley.
President Biden and the First Lady met with the families of the 13 U.S. service members who died in the terrorist attack at the Kabul airport. Biden spoke at a FEMA meeting about the fallen troops and the devastation Hurricane Ida has caused.
Jill and I are just getting back from Dover Air Force Base in my home state, where we met with the families of 13 fallen heroes in Afghanistan who lost their lives in the service of our country. And while we're praying for the best in Louisiana, let's keep them in our prayers as well.
Biden said the troops made the ultimate sacrifice while assisting in the evacuation that he said brought over 117,000 people to safety. And Biden refused to answer a question on Afghanistan at the meeting. The U.S. military identified the fallen service members. They include Marines Staff Sergeant Darren Hoover, Sergeant Johnny Rosario Pichardo, Sergeant Nicole G., Corporal Dagan Page, Corporal Humberto Sanchez, Lance Corporal David Espinoza, Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz, Lance Corporal Dylan Marola, Lance Corporal Kareem Nakui, Lance Corporal Riley J. McCullum, and Navy Hospitalman Maxton Soviak, Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Knaus, and Marine Corporal Hunter Lopez. Lance Corporal Kareem Nakui had sent home a video in which he was giving Afghan children candy a day before he died. Another Marine who was killed, Corporal Hunter Lopez, had plans to come back to the United States to follow in his parents' footsteps with a career in law enforcement. He wanted to be a deputy at the sheriff's office in Riverside County, California. A vigil was held in Boston for Marine Sergeant Johnny Rosario Pichardo. Pichardo's family had requested privacy. Anger and sadness spilled over at the vigil, with the mother of a U.S. Marine killed in Iraq speaking out.
You know why we are all here, for the horrendous, I'm calling it a mistake, of an evacuation plan, which makes me very angry. Lives were lost. My veteran community is grieving. My Gold Star family members are feeling the shock all over again. Should it have happened? Never.
At the home in Ohio where the fallen sailors' parents live, the flag was at half-staff. Friends, teachers, and families stopped by to offer their condolences.
I would want them to know that Max always was smiling. We had a lot of good conversations, and Max was good for pulling shenanigans and like the other people to laugh. And that's what I would want people to know about him.
Word of the sailor's death spread quickly through the village, and by the late afternoon, more flags were set up along the street.
A former Afghan interpreter who is living in the U.S. now says the Afghan military was always ready to fight the Taliban until they received orders to surrender. NTD's Jason Perry had an exclusive interview with this interpreter who prefers to remain anonymous for safety reasons.
It's not safe for anybody there right now, so especially for the people who work for the coalition forces or U.S. Army.
This former interpreter has family members in Afghanistan who worked with Americans. And with the Taliban controlling most of the country, he says his relatives need help and he fears for their lives.
My brother and nephew, they stuck there. They work with the U.S. Army, and they did apply for SIV, but they just did it like the last minute because they really wasn't too much, they didn't know that that's gonna happen like this. Everything just turned over in a day.
It was an unexpected and quick end to the Afghan military, and President Biden said their troops didn't have the will to fight. But this interpreter, who used to fight next to the Afghan military, says Biden's words couldn't be further from the truth.
I went in the missions with them, and I saw how they fight, especially the commandos or the Afghan Special Forces, which was trained by U.S. Special Forces. And they were trained, they got the best training in the world because the U.S. Special Forces is the best in the world.
The Taliban took over Kunduz province in June, but only for a few days.
I remember, after 3 days from Kabul, they sent only 100 of the Afghan Special Forces. And they cleared the whole city. They killed more than 1,000 of them. They have no injury, no casualties, not civilian casualties, without anything. And now they come with these motorcycles and they just surrender everybody. Somebody told them not to fight.
The Afghan military and the Afghan police also fought the Taliban in Wardak province to a surprising end.
They fought for a week with no food, no water, nothing, and no ammunition, no support. They were calling in Kabul to please support us, send us something, at least food. Nobody was sending them. So after 1 week, when they had no food, from Hungary, they had no choice. They surrendered themselves. That time, I was kind of suspect that something was going on.
There were also other battles between the Afghan military and the Taliban, but reportedly, the Afghan military never received reinforcements or supplies when they called for backup, and they didn't receive any air support when they called in airstrikes. Then the interpreter heard from his own relative who was in the Afghan military about the situation. The relative said their commanders ordered everyone to surrender.
I'm just concerned about my brother and nephew that they stuck there because Taliban is I heard that they're looking like house to house, for those people who support the United States Army.
And now they are waiting for an email from the embassy to go to the airport. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Life waits for no one, and this little life couldn't wait either. A baby girl was born aboard a flight to the UK. Her mom is an Afghan evacuee. As Soman Nouri was leaving her old life behind in Afghanistan, she was also bringing a new one into the world. The 26-year-old gave birth on her flight to the UK on Saturday. Turkish Airlines says cabin crew helped deliver the baby at an altitude of 6 miles. Nouri was on board the flight from Dubai to Britain's Birmingham when she began having contractions. The plane landed in Kuwait as a precaution before continuing on its journey. The girl is reportedly called Hava, and she's in good condition. California's Caldor fire moved closer to more heavily populated areas in the northern part of the state on Sunday, leading to more evacuation orders and warnings as well as road closures. NTD's Andrew Thomas reports.
The fire has been active for 14 days and has spread across more than 168,000 acres, causing evacuation orders in several counties. The department issued updated evacuation warnings for El Dorado County, including the remainder of the South Lake Tahoe Basin. Lake Tahoe is a popular vacation destination, and tourists there contended with smoke and falling ash. The fire was also dangerously close to the small town of Strawberry, 100 miles south of Tahoe. Fire crews in Strawberry are running backfire operations, setting small fires along the main fire line to consume fuel in the path of the wildfire, to help protect local structures, including a historic lodge that dates to the 1850s. The fire is between 13% and 19% contained and has damaged multiple residential, commercial, and other buildings, and has destroyed over 650 structures so far. At least 5 firefighters and civilians have been injured. California typically experiences its peak fire season in late summer and fall, and is already on pace to be worse than last year, the worst on record. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
The Missouri Attorney General says a multi-state human trafficking operation has rescued 47 victims and arrested 102 people. His office says sting operations were both buyer and victim-centric. Victims were rescued and suspects were arrested in 12 states. Kentucky had both the largest number of arrests made and the most victims rescued. The operation was led by the Missouri Attorney General's office and the Missouri State Highway Patrol. It included various law enforcement agencies in multiple states. Homeland Security investigations and the FBI were also involved. The Missouri Attorney General says the operation was unprecedented. Newly unsealed court documents in a fraud trial of a startup that has since collapsed. The founder of the blood testing company Theranos is accusing her boyfriend of abuse.
Lawyers for Elizabeth Holmes said they plan to present evidence that Ramesh Balwani abused her emotionally and psychologically in a relationship that spanned more than a decade. During that time, her company claimed its technology could enable a wide array of medical tests with a few drops of blood. Theranos collapsed in March 2018 when she, Balwani, and the $9 billion company were charged with fraud by US regulators. Both Holmes and Balwani, who was president of the startup, had pleaded not guilty to charges they defrauded investors, doctors, and patients. The court filings, submitted more than 18 months ago, hint at a possible defense strategy for Holmes, with jury selection in her fraud trial set to start next week. The filings indicate Holmes intends to blame Balwani, alleging he exerted control over her through the abusive relationship, thus raising the question of whether she knew that financial information provided to investors and others was false. Balwani, whose case is being handled separately, has denied the allegations.
Avocados and ants are headed into space. A SpaceX rocket blasted off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, loaded with food and experiments for the International Space Station.
3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff.
The Dragon capsule is carrying more than 4,800 pounds of supplies and experiments. It's also carrying fresh food like avocados, lemons, and even ice cream for the space station's 7 astronauts. Other groups are also sending up experiments for the space station. The Girl Scouts are sending ants, brine shrimp, and plants as test subjects. Scientists at the University of Wisconsin-Madison are flying up seeds from a plant used in genetic research. A Japanese startup company is sending up a robotic arm that they hope will perform duties usually done by astronauts. They hope to expand the usage of robotics in space. The USDA is warning consumers about a recall of Italian antipasto. Nearly 900,000 pounds of the food products have been flagged because of salmonella contamination. Food wholesaler Fratelli Beretta says the recall includes its 24-ounce trays of uncured Italian-style meats sold at Costco. The CDC has connected the company's charcuterie assortments to a salmonella outbreak with cases in 17 states. While there have been no fatalities, the CDC has reported 36 illnesses and 12 hospitalizations between May and late July. People who have purchased the product can return it to their local Costco or call the company's hotline at 866-918-8738. Coming up, under the baking sun of southern France, dozens of workers collect a precious white flower that is a key ingredient to the famed fragrance Chanel No. 5. Stay tuned to find out more.
You worked hard for your money. You invest in stability for your retirement and your family's future, to build and leave them with something greater. The next unprecedented financial crisis, political misstep, or unstable government can depreciate it all away. It was called the gold standard for a reason, the financial preservation of tomorrow. Diversify your assets against inflation, market volatility, and the unknown with real money. Hedge your wealth with the purest form of money, physical gold and silver. Because any currency printed on paper can be manipulated. What's backing up your IRA? Do what you need to do right now to be prepared with the Reagan Gold Group. Visit now, rggusakit.com, or call us at 866-912-1384. Receive up to $2,500 in free silver coins and a free safe with your new Precious Metals IRA. Call now.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
Thousands of cows made the hours-long trip from high in the Swiss Alps down to lower pastures. The traditional journey marks the end of the herd's summer stay in higher altitudes. About 50 farmers rang bells bright and early, around 5 a.m., to guide 1,200 cattle down the mountain pass. The animals spent the summer 6,400 feet above sea level. The walk back down lasts about 5 hours. Injured cows that couldn't join the procession were airlifted by helicopter to lower pastures the day before. Dairy farmer Kobe Arnold says he's been participating in the bovine parade for 3 years. He joined the trip with his 15-member herd. He says his cows will stay in the area for a few weeks if the weather holds up. In southern France, dozens of pickers are working to harvest jasmine flowers. It's a key ingredient in the famous Chanel No. 5 perfume, which is celebrating its 100th anniversary. Here's more.
Can you guess the name of this white 5-petaled flower? It sometimes goes with green tea, and it's also the key ingredient in one of the most famous fragrances, the Chanel No. 5, jasmine. These fragrant flowers are collected in the southern French city of Grasse, wearing white-brown hats to shield them from the Mediterranean sun. Dozens of pickers collect handfuls of them. Chanel struck a deal with the local Mule family, who owns the fields, to be provided with their jasmine flowers.
The jasmine of Grasse is probably the most important ingredient of Chanel's No. 5 perfume. It is an ingredient that we've had to work hard for.
This year marks the perfume's 100th anniversary, though the pandemic has marred the celebration. But according to the Mule family, production has not been overly affected by COVID-19. The virus can cause some people to lose their sense of taste and smell, a particular problem for perfumers known as noses in the business.
For sure. It was a pretty peculiar year, but in many ways, it was the same for me as everyone. Even though I'm a nose, we all tried not to get COVID-19.
Though the first modern perfumes were created in the late 19th century, the tradition of fragrance making has existed here in Grasse since the Middle Ages, a craft that has been passed down and perfected since then. In 1921, fashion designer Coco Chanel created her brand's signature fragrance, composed of over a dozen scents. It was favored by Hollywood stars such as Marilyn Monroe and Audrey Hepburn, which propelled the jasmine-based perfume into the spotlight.
The U.S. Open issues a statement that it will now require all ticket holders to have proof of vaccination against the CCP virus. The rule comes months after tickets went on sale. The event's organizers originally said vaccination wasn't mandatory, but the policy change comes just days before matches are set to begin. The tennis stadium says it's matching the New York City mayor's requirements for events. A United States Tennis Association spokesperson detailed the change to the New York Post, saying a ticket holder who hasn't been vaccinated is encouraged to get a vaccine, sell their ticket to someone who is vaccinated, or get a refund. Players competing in the tournament do not have to get a vaccination, but if they test positive, they will have to isolate for 10 days and withdraw from the tournament. Toyota's chief executive has apologized after a self-driving transportation vehicle collided with a visually impaired athlete at the Tokyo Paralympic Games.
Toyota has suspended use of all of its self-driving e-pallet transportation pods at the Tokyo Paralympic Games village. That announcement coming a day after one of the vehicles collided with a visually impaired athlete. In a YouTube video, Toyota Chief Executive Akio Toyoda said the incident showed that autonomous vehicles are not yet realistic for normal roads. The e-pallet, a fully autonomous battery electric vehicle, was adapted specifically for use during the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games. The vehicle in question had stopped at a T-junction and was under the manual control of the operator, who was using its joystick. It collided with a pedestrian going at around 1 or 2 kilometers an hour, Toyoda said. He added that Paralympic officials had told him the athlete, who remained conscious, was taken to a medical center for treatment and was able to walk back to their residence. The company said it was cooperating with a local police probe to determine the cause of the accident, adding that it would also conduct its own investigation.
The San Diego Zoo is celebrating the birth of a 125-pound baby girl. In this case, she's a rare white rhino calf. Since 1972, the San Diego Zoo has been successfully breeding the threatened species in captivity. Over the years, 104 baby white rhinos have been born at the zoo, adding to the population of just 18,000 left in the world. The baby girl has not been named yet, and she'll continue to nurse during her first year of life. But she's got a bit of growing to do. When full grown, at around 3 years of age, she could weigh between 4,000 and 5,000 pounds. Thanks for watching. At NTD, we're honored to be your source for the news. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan.
On TV. NTD Evening News is on every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Find your local NTD channel at ntd.com/TV.